Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first of a four-part mini-series about leadership. So you're going to say, what does leadership have to do with me? All right? What do I have to do with leadership? And the answer is that in one way or another, we're all really involved in leadership. Be it if we are involved in leadership with our house, our kids, our friends, our cousins, our spouses. We're all to a certain degree involved in some level of leadership. Because leadership is not what we think. Oh, the person that sits on the dais. Leadership is not, the person that sits up by the Ark, by the Aron Kodesh. He's the leader, a teacher, a head of the kollel, right? Someone executive, a CEO. Oh, those are leaders. Leadership, there's a difference between a leader and leadership, right? A leader is an individual that has a position. Leadership is a person that takes on the role of knowing that he has a responsibility for other people. That's leadership. And we're going to expand on this idea. We're going to speak about different points, and we're going to look at different great leaders of the Jewish people and learn from them what it means to be a leader. As always, we're going to take questions. If anybody has questions during the class, you can try to chat with me, and I'll try to answer it. Or write it on Facebook Live if you have any questions during the class. I can't promise I'll get to it, but of course, after the class, please write your questions down and ask away after the class. So again, to review, we are going to be talking about for the next 3 weeks, besides the next 4 weeks, including tonight, about what it means to be a good leader. How does one able to find the ability to lead and educate other people? Now, education, again, is not giving a class. It's not education. Education not necessarily means giving the sermon. Education doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be writing emails to a whole community and things like that. When we hear leadership, and I know I'm spending some time on this because I think it's important for us to realize that so many times we think when we hear leadership, we think of people that are, whoa, more than life. How could they do it? They're just all over the place, and they have so many talents and so many abilities. Leadership's not for me. It's not something for me. What do I even have to be part of this class for? It's important to remember, right, that leadership is a lot more than that. Right? Leadership is something that is ingrained inside of each one of us, that we have to be a leader. Now, I want to bring out this point that before we get to the different leaders that we're going to talk about, right, I want to bring out this point from an unbelievable concept. Right? There's this unbelievable concept of, in the Torah it says, right? Go ahead and rebuke your friend, but make sure there's no sin. So in the past, we've talked about the idea of what it means, right? And there shouldn't be any sin. Give rebuke to your friend, right? But make sure there's no sin. We've spoken about that in the past, that, so many times we go ahead and rebuke our friend, and while we're rebuking them, on the contrary, we're doing a lot worse. We're doing sin, right? It's not our place to rebuke them. It's not our place to go ahead and to, tell them what to do. And there's a point to that. Make sure there's no sin. But that's not the point I want to bring out today. The point I want to bring out today, my friends, is that make sure that you go ahead and you rebuke your friend. Now, rebuke is a harsh word. Right? That's a literal translation of hokeach techiach. Right? But the commentaries explain that hokeach techiach, rebuke your friend, is not the harsh word of rebuke, but meaning to say that you should be hearing and thinking about what your friend is doing, if it's right or wrong. You can say, Don't be a nosy buddy. Don't get into my business. What's wrong with you? Why are you getting into my business? What are you doing that for? Legitimate question. But the answer is that I'm not getting in your business. That's where it is. That's where the idea of lo sisa lo chet. But it's still incumbent upon us, and each Jew, and each individual, Jew, non-Jew, right? But there's a greater responsibility for your fellow Jew to be concerned and to reflect on what other people are doing, to make sure that people around you are doing the right thing. Now, if you have no way of telling them or correcting them or to help them out, so then what is in my responsibility? Forget about mind my own business, but what's my responsibility? I can't do anything about it. I have no obligation. God didn't give me the gifts to do anything about it. I can't speak. I can't write an article. I can't. What's my responsibility? And the answer is that we all have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility for everybody, our brethren, the community at large, our family, to make sure that people are on the right track. We all have a responsibility of to have leadership. We all have that responsibility. Now, how are we able to do that? We'll talk about that. What's the proper way of doing it? We'll talk about that. But we all have the responsibility. We all are ravens, we're all responsible for each other. We all have a responsibility for one another. It's a mind-boggling thing if you think about it. We are responsible for one another, especially your family. So before we even start our course, after the next couple of weeks, first I have to understand that leadership, being a leader, right, is an idea of having a responsibility for other people. That's what it is. People think leadership is this great thing, right? Oh, you get to sit in the dais, you get to sit up front, people come and shake your hand, and oh, you get to speak to so many people. That is an outcome. That is something that comes out of it. But what is true leadership? True leadership is a responsibility for other people. That is true leadership. In a nutshell, if you walked out of a class just by this point, leadership is a responsibility for other people. That's what leadership is. Just a reminder, I see some more people came on, and it's good to see you all. Just a reminder, if you have any questions during the class, please send a message, and I'll try to get to it. I have my message open, or on Facebook, write a message. I'll try to get to it during the class. I know in the past we've not had questions during the class, and I'm trying to change things up a little bit. So if you have a question, just write it in the group chat, and I'll try to get to it. Or, of course, after class, everybody's able to stick around as long as you need, and I'll try to answer any questions that people have. But if you have a question during the class, go ahead and just write it in the chat, and I'll try to get to it. So just a reminder, let's get back on track. What is leadership? A responsibility. That's what leadership is. So I want to just, today we're going to give a more of an overview, and then we're going to dig deep into one of the leaderships. The different leaders that I want to talk about, and I'm still putting it together, right? But I definitely want to speak about Avraham Avinu. And we're going to talk today about Avraham Avinu, God willing, for the rest of the class, for the rest of about a half hour, 40 minutes. We're going to talk about Avraham Avinu. But we're also going to talk about Moshe, of course. We're going to talk about King David. And then the last class will probably put together a couple of other leaders, probably Esther and Miriam, probably some from Sarah, and Rachel and Leah, some other leaders, Jewish leaders of our matriarchs and great leaders of the Jewish people. But today I want to home in on Avraham Avinu. I want to home in on Avraham Avinu. Who is Avraham Avinu? Right? What was so great about Avraham Avinu? Avraham Avinu, yes, he was a leader. Right? Av Amon Goyim, right? The father of all the nations of the world, right? Avram, Av Amon Goyim, right? That was his name. That's why he was called what he was called. Avraham Avinu, Avram Gaim, he was responsible. Let's see. Let's go through some stories. Where do we find that Avraham Avinu felt the responsibility? Right? Where do we find that he felt the responsibility? So, Avraham Avinu, right? He went ahead and he went to save his nephew Lot. So you can say that's family. Okay, that's true. But he felt the responsibility. He went ahead and he went to save his nephew Lot. That's something very important. Right? He felt the responsibility. So he went to save his nephew Lot. Where else do we find Avraham Avinu with the responsibility? We find another place that Avraham Avinu, right, also, right, went and fought the 4 kings, right, when Sodom was being captured, right. He went ahead, right. Same thing with Lot, right. We went ahead and he fought them. We find Avraham Avinu having responsibility, right, when he's taking in guests from all over the place, right. We find that same thing. Avraham Avinu had the responsibility. Who's taking guests in from everywhere, right? We find that's the 4 angels, right? The angels, right? The angels were the angels that came. We see that Avraham Avinu was out there. He was trying to have guests. He felt the responsibility to everybody around him on the physical level. Spiritual level, we find Avraham Avinu, right, is a connection better now? I'm sorry, I think I'm having a connection issue. Please let me know. I see people are saying that it's cutting out. Is it better now? Okay, so we see that Avraham Avinu had a responsibility for the physical, right? We find that Avraham Avinu had a responsibility for the spiritual also, right? Where we find that Avraham Avinu had a responsibility for the spiritual, he went ahead and he educated people. He said that he brought all his students with him. So we see, right, that Avraham Avinu, right, number one, and we see this, that Avraham Avinu had, and we're going to see this, and we're going to point this out by all of the leaderships, right? That Avraham Avinu, and they all had a sense of responsibility for whoever they were being the leaders of. Right? They had a sense of responsibility for their family, right? For just everybody around them, right? Physically, spiritually, right? That is the essence of a leader. And this is something very important to remember, right? That when we want to start thinking about leadership, right? When we want to start thinking about, right, are we a leader? Are we not a leader? Right? Is it something that we're part of or not? Right? We have to remember, right, that that leadership is not something that's beyond us. Leadership is, and most important, a responsibility, and that's something that everybody could have. We all could have a sense of responsibility. And it's something that we have to, and that's, again, right? Go ahead and rebuke your friend. Say the commentaries, the idea of rebuking your friend is a concept of feeling the responsibility, right, for everybody else. I am sorry that the audio is breaking up. I'm not sure what's with the connection. I apologize. I can't really do anything about it right now. I truly apologize. Please let me know if it gets better. It's the internet here, which is usually very good and strong, but I'm not sure why it's breaking up. So that's first and foremost. And again, we see this in Avraham Avinu, and we see this by all of the leadership that every time we speak about a leader, we're going to bring this point out. Okay, so now let's move on, right? Let's move on, right, to some of the qualities of Avraham Avinu, right? And be able to learn from Avraham Avinu, right? Some of these unbelievable character traits for us to work on to be able to grow, right, in our spirituality. Okay, so number one. Says Pirkei Avot, and I want to go through Pirkei Avot for a minute. Pirkei Avot says, "Kol mi sheyesh biyado shosha dvarim," right? Halalu hu mitamid shalom Avraham Avinu. Whoever has these three character traits, right? These three character traits are from the students of Avraham Avinu. What are they? Ayin tov, a good eye, ruach nachama, v'nefesh shafala, right? A humble demeanor and an undermining soul, right? And a nefesh shafala, a low soul. We'll talk about that in a minute. These are the students of Avraham Avinu. So let's go through it. What does it mean? Right? Ayin tova. What does it mean by a good eye? What does a good eye mean? So it continues in Pirkei Avot, and it says, a good eye, right, means one who is satisfied with his possessions and does not crave the money of others. This attribute was found in Avram, following the war against the four kings, right, when he declined any of the booty from the king of Sodom. So, number one, ayin tov, a good eye. Right? So I would have said, a good eye. Right? A good eye means to say that you're able to, measure people up properly. Right? That's what you want. Good leader, a good eye, is able to measure people up properly. That's what it means, a good eye. That's not what it says. That's not what it says. You know what it means, a good eye? A good eye means, that he's able to tell what's going on, and he's able to see things in its proper way. Right? That's what it means, a good eye. That's not what it means, a good eye. What does a good eye mean? Says Pirkei Avot, right? A good eye means that he's able to, right? A good eye means to say that he doesn't look at other people's possessions. That's what a good eye means. Right? A good eye means to say that he doesn't look at other people's possessions. He's not jealous of other people. That's a good eye. Right? Where do we find this? Because when he went to the king of Sodom, right? When he went to the king of Sodom and he rescued the king of Sodom said, hey, I want to give you some of the booty from the war. And he said, no. I'll take only what Hashem gives me. What does that have to do with leadership? What does that have to do with Avraham Avinu, from the students of Avraham? Okay, it's a good attribute. But what does this have to do with the leadership of Avraham Avinu? So say the commentary is something unbelievable, guys. This is something really very powerful. If probably one of the most important things regarding a leadership. Say the commentaries, right? What does it mean that he had a good eye and that he wasn't concerned about he didn't look at other people's possessions and he was happy with his lot, right? To be a good leader, to be concerned about other people, to feel a responsibility for other people, you can't want what they need, what they have. Guys, this is unbelievable, right? If you want what someone else has, right? You're jealous of their fancy car, right? You're a leader or you're a person in the community, and or their good looks, right? Or their ability to speak, or whatever, they could sing properly. They're good chazan. They get along with other people. They're more outgoing. They're less outgoing, right? Whatever it is, all their physical, external attributes, right? They're smart, they're this, they're that God gave them. If you do all that, right? And you want it, and you're jealous of it, so then how the heck are you supposed to be a good leader, really be concerned about them? Don't forget, one of the core values of a leadership, and which is applicable to everybody, is concerned about other people. Nosim ol chavero, taking the responsibility for other people. But if you want what they have, if you constantly think about what they have and not about what you have, right? So then how are you going to be okay of thinking about them? This is unbelievable. It's so simple. To be a good leader. And a good leader, again, doesn't mean to say that you have to be sitting on the dais, and it doesn't have to be that you have a big, long, white beard, or you're a famous speaker that does JWRP speeches, or whatever it is, right? A good leader, each one of us, we're leaders of our community, is feeling the responsibility for other people, is thinking about what they need, because you're not thinking about what they have that you want. You're very satisfied with what you have. You're very happy with what you have. You're not concerned about what you have. King Sodom, I don't need your stuff, said Avraham Avinu. So step number one of Avraham Avinu, and one of the things that we have to work on, and to truly be a good friend, that's a leader also, right? Leaders, you're leading other people to do the right thing, right? To care about other people, to feel the responsibility about other people. Number one, right, is to have a good eye. Meaning to say, not judging people properly. To say, oh, there's a good person, a bad person. That's, of course, important. But number one, as we said, is not wanting other people's stuff. Being happy with your lot. Being happy with what you have. And then you could go ahead and really reflect on other people's needs and wants, because you're not clouded by what you could get out of them or what they have and you want. That's number one. Any questions on that, anybody? Okay. Number two, says the Pirkei Avos, continues the Pirkei Avos and says, Ruach Nechama. Right? What does that mean? Right? How do you understand a humble demeanor? Despite his recognized status, Avraham had a great humility. As he said, I am merely dust and ashes. Right? So continues Pirkei Avos along the same lines with something a little different. How do what does it mean, a humble, the Ruach Nechama? Being humble. Right? And I spoke about this a little bit. By the pre-Shavuos learning. Right? I spoke about this a little bit, but I'll expand on it now a little more. Right? Says, what does it mean? I'm merely dust and ashes. Right? He's humble. He's humble. Merely dust and ashes. So what does this have to do with a leader? A leader should be strong-minded. A leader should be someone that could present himself. A leader should be someone that has a presence, right? I've heard that a lot. Leader, head of school, has to have someone that has a presence. Can't be trampled over. It says, Avraham Avinu said, I'm merely dust and ashes. He looked at himself as nothing. What, you got trampled? You could be the strongest person. You could have the strongest presence. But how do you look at yourself regarding the eyes of other people and the eyes of God? How do you look at yourself regarding, are you accomplishing your responsibilities? Are you being able to fulfill what you're supposed to be fulfilling? It says Avraham Avinu, I'm merely dust and ashes. I haven't even scraped the surface of what I'm supposed to be doing. I haven't scraped the surface. I have so much to accomplish. I don't know. I'm like dust and ashes. This is unbelievable. Avraham Avinu, that's how he thinks. He tells God, I'm merely dust and ashes. If you look at oneself and realize that I am not accomplishing everything that I can do, if one realizes that he has so much more that he could accomplish, and that's what we spoke about. If you remember, when we get to Moshe, we're going to talk about Moshe, and I don't want to talk too much about it right now. But we said, right, Moshe Rabbeinu Adam Mikol Adam is the most humble man of all times. Again, the same character trait. Right? We'll talk about it just a little bit by Moshe, but there's many more things to talk about Moshe. Right? But we're going to talk about it a little more over here. What does it mean? Why is humbleness a character trait of leadership? Is because when you, as an individual, realizes that they're not all it, they realize that there's so much more besides yourself, then you're able to, again, truly think about other people, and you're also able to truly reflect, ask advice from other people. Oh, leaders don't ask advice? Of course leaders ask advice. Right? Leaders also have to ask advice. Right? Leaders have to know to ask other people. But if you think you're it, you're never going to ask advice. And if you don't ask advice, you'll never be able to help your congregation, your friends, right? Your spouse, your kids, your community. You'll never be able to help them fully if you don't yourself realize that sometimes you need to ask. Excuse me. You don't yourself have to go ask advice. So number two, right? Ruach Nechama. A humble demeanor. Anochi Afer Ve'efer. right? Are merely dust and ashes. Now, why ashes? Right? Dust, okay, it's like dust of the earth, right? Dust of the earth, okay, we come from the earth, right? But what's with ashes? Why did Avraham Avinu say ashes? I saw this beautiful idea once. What is ashes? Ashes comes from something that was a log, right? A structure, something that was solid, and it burnt up. That's ashes. Right? Ashes is something that got burnt up, that it's not around. It's the residue, it's the leftovers, right? Of something that was solid, a home, a piece of wood, a tree, right? Even paper, but that paper is not the ashes that it talks about over here, right? But anything that was solid and it got burnt up, that's what ashes are. So Avraham Avinu is saying that I have to constantly remind myself that number one, I'm like dust. It means to say that maybe I never even accomplished anything yet to what I'm able to accomplish. I didn't even realize, I wasn't able to even start my process. And if I keep on telling myself, no, I did, I have to remind myself that I'm also like dust, like ashes. It means to say that I could be, it's all burnt up, right? Maybe I made a mistake here, maybe I made a mistake there. I'm not really holding where I'm supposed to be holding, and it's more like ashes. The solid structure that I thought it was, I have to burn it down and sort of start again. And that's something that we all always have to reflect on internally and think. And this doesn't mean to say not to have a strong presence. Doesn't mean to say that someone shouldn't have self-confidence. Of course, you have to have self-confidence and you have to have a presence, and different people have different personalities. It's more of a way of how you work on yourself. It's more of a way of how you look about yourself regarding what else you could accomplish. And a good leader always has to be thinking of how he could accomplish more, how there's more that could accomplish, how you haven't either scratched the surface or what you have done already could just burn down, and you have to make sure that you start again. That's number two. Number three is the nefesh shafala. So what does that mean? Right? One who exercised control over his desires. This control was found in Avram when he and Sarah were about to enter Egypt, as it is written, "Behold, now I know that you are beautiful." For until this point, he had not noticed her beauty because of her great modesty. All right, so not to get too off topic, right? But we have to talk about this, right? What does it mean by nefesh shafala? So the Pirkei Avos decides to pick up that it says that he was in control of his desires. Right? He was in control of where do we find that he was in control of his desires? I read it, so I'm gonna have to explain it. Right? It says that Pirkei Avos, so we find that according to one of the opinions Rashi quotes, it's a midrash, right? And Pirkei Avos is a midrash, so midrash, just not to get too off topic, midrash is the writings of the Tanaim. Pirkei Avos is the writing of the Tanaim. Right? So some are more cryptic, some of them are straightforward, right? Some have to be known how to learn, right? But they're all the words of the Tanaim. It's all part of Torah Shabbal Peh, so no one should look down on them, God forbid, right? But the Midrash tells us that when it says that Avraham Avinu was going down to Egypt, and he says, "Oh, right, now I know that you're beautiful," right? So one of the Medrash says that Avraham until now didn't really notice the beauty of Sarah. Now that he was at a junction of Sarah being maybe taken because of her beauty, then he recognized and spoke about her beauty. But say the commentaries, and there's many other explanations, right? But the point for our discussion, right? Say the commentaries, and Pirkei Avos is pointing out that Avraham Avinu was in control of his desires, of his physical, right, desires, right? That he was able to control, right, his way of looking at beauty, right, and not allow it to overtake him. Not allow it to overtake him. And I want to talk about this for a couple minutes, right, because this is something very important, something that anybody that says that they're not struggling with this is fooling themselves. I don't care how long of a beard they have. I don't care how righteous they think they are, right? I don't care how well learned they are or how secular they are. It doesn't make a difference where you're holding, right? How moral you are and how moral you're not, right? It's part of the human nature that God made us, that we have desires, right? And we have to curb those desires for a healthy manner, of course, right? That's why there's a mitzvah for getting married, right? That's why there's God allows us to eat good food, right? We have to make a blessing. We have to do it in a proper way, right? And other things. And I don't want to talk about that point too much. But the point I do want to talk about is that Avram Avinu, right? The Pirkei Avos goes out of its way to point out, right? And again, one of the things regarding leadership, and Avram Avinu is able to be in control of his desires to the extent that his way of expressing with his wife, and of course he loved his wife, and not to take it in any negative way, God forbid, right? But the point is that it's telling us over here that now Avram realized that there's going to be a problem because he's going to Egypt and they don't have control over their desires. That him and his wife had to talk about this beauty that she had in a manner that's typically not a modest way of dealing with, that other people are going to look at you, other people are going to this, right? And not in a modest way. But up until then, they didn't have the need to talk about it, so they were under control of their desires. But what does this have to do with leadership? Okay, so Avraham Avinu, Abraham was great. He was the first monotheistic, first one to believe in God, right? Only one God. He broke the idols, and right, which is another thing to talk about. I don't know if we're going to have time today. But what is this? What is this such a great thing of leadership? Okay, it's a great attribute, great thing that Avraham Avinu worked on. But why is this something that's considered like, whoa? And say the commentaries, right, that a leader and someone that is wanting to help other people, at the same way we spoke about that they can't be looking at other people's possessions because they might be fooled into how they give help to that person, or they might be clouded by their judgment because of their needs and wants, right, regarding other people's possessions. It's the same thing with desires. If someone cannot control their desires, how are they going to go ahead and educate other people about certain things, right? And again, not talking about anything, God forbid, right? Talking about just your typical straight up things. If one cannot control themselves regarding eating. Let's talk about eating, right? Eating things that the Torah tells us not to eat. Excuse me, and because it's so delicious and so great. Okay, and therefore, but God told you not to do it. Or I just can't control this. What about the blessing? Did you make a blessing? Desires is many different aspects. Right? One of them is sexual, right? But desires is meaning to say that our instinct, our animal instinct, is in control. It's very different than coveting other people's stuff, right? Wanting other people, not being able to a good eye. I'm pointing this out because one has to see the difference. That is not being out of. That's something that intellectually I want other people's stuff, and I need it and I want, and it's going to cloud your judgment. This desires, and whatever the desire is, right, is not allowing yourself to be in control, but allowing your animal component of yourself to be controlled. Your instincts, not being able to think rationally. Right? We know addiction, right? And one should never be addicted to anything. And then everybody that is, please get help, right? And we're not judging anybody, God forbid. Right? But addiction, you're not thinking properly. Now, I'm not saying everybody that has desires is addicted to things, but to a certain degree, we are a little bit, right? Not to the extent, but to a certain degree, we're impulse, right? We talked about this before, I know this, I know I shouldn't be eating this cake. It's not good for me, but I go ahead and eat it. You know not to do it, but I want it, it's so good. And I do it myself, right? I'm human. I do it myself. Some of you that have been to some of my other classes, right? No, I talk about my potato chips, right? I'm allergic to potatoes. Thank God, not deathly, right? So if it was deathly, of course, I want to be eating it, right? But I'm allergic to potatoes. It gives me bad headaches and my eyes water, right? I get bad headaches. But I really like potato chips, especially the spicier the better. The spicier the better. And, I've cheated sometimes. When I'm getting gas in a gas station, I'll go and get a bag and then try to hide it in my car that my wife doesn't see it, of course. And, of course, she knows I have it, right? But, I want it. And I know it's bad for me. But we're really allowing another component to take control. So yes, we all have it to a certain degree. That's our challenge. That's what we have to overcome. And some things, okay, it's not something bad. But there are certain things that are against the Torah, against what God wants from us. So to truly be a good leader, to truly being able to have a thought of what to do and what not to do, to be able to recognize what other people need, is not to be governed by your impulse, by your animal part. Yes, Sherry, ice cream, right? But right, not by your animal part, but by your intellect, right? By your intellect. That is a very important component of leadership, right? Because if you're not able to do that, right, then we don't know where truly the leadership, the component is coming from, right? We don't really know where it's coming from. So says the Mishnah, and in Pirkei Avos, whoever has these three things of Avraham Avinu, right? Whoever has these three things of Avraham Avinu, he is a student of Avraham Avinu, right? He's a student of Avraham Avinu, means to say that he is following in his footsteps, and he will be able to have that leadership quality. You don't have to be a good speaker, right? Doesn't say over here, Avraham Avinu is a good speaker. It didn't say that Avraham Avinu had a presence, right? He was a good writer, right? He doesn't say that, right? These three things are attributes about a person that allows them to really be noshim be'ol chaver, to really think about their friend, their people around them, to allow them to focus, right, and to think about other people, and then hopefully to be able to give them sound advice to help them along the way. Excuse me. I want to end off. I want to end off with a very, very important idea that we find in Avraham Avinu, which I think really is only able to accomplish this, right? With the three attributes that we just spoke about, right? To really think properly. And I know we've talked about this in the past, but with the direction that we're talking about, I think it works very nicely. What is it? It says in Bereshis, when it introduces Avraham Avinu, it says, right, Avraham Avinu, it says, Avram Av Amon Goyim, right? The father of all the nations. Right? But then it also, we spoke about that, right? Because he had concern about everybody. Right? Avraham Avinu, he was Av Amon Goyim, and now that really gives us an understanding. He really thought about other people, he was concerned about other people. But there's another way, Avram is also called Avram Ivri. Avram the Ivri. Right? What does Ivri mean? So we say Ivri, what do you mean? Hebrew, right? Hebrew, right? Yeah, that's where it comes from, right? But Avram probably didn't speak Hebrew. Might have spoken Lashon HaKodesh, right? Which is Hebrew is a modern component of Lashon HaKodesh, but not to get into that right now, right? What does it mean that Avram Ha'ivri? So Rashi quotes Rav Yehuda, right? Rav Yehuda said, right, that it teaches us that the entire world were standing on one side and you were standing on the other side. Avram the Ha'ivri, right? Very good, Sherry. You've been to our other classes, and I'm glad to see that you wrote that, right? And I'm glad to see that you remember. Very good, kol kavod, right? But what does it mean that Avram was on one side and everybody else on the other side? And it says Avram he went to the other side of the Nahar, right? He crossed the river, right? Crossed to the other side of the river, and everybody's on one side and he was on the other side. As the commentaries, why does the Torah call Avram HaIvri, right? The Ivri, because he was on one side of the river and everybody's on the side of the river, right? Everybody was on one side, he was on the other side, and for generations now we're known as the Hebrews, right? Now we're known as Jews from Judah, right? Not to get into that either, right? But we're known as the Hebrews. What is this? Why is this an attribute of Avram? Why is this the makeup of Avram? A name is something that it defines who you are. And a name is something that makes you something. So why did Torah decide to call Avram Ivri? And say the commentaries, because Avram Avinu, to be able to be who he is, and to truly be a leader, he had to be able to say, I am not going to bend to pressure. If this is what I believe, and I truly believe it, right? And after checking to make sure that it's not coveting other people's possessions, making sure that I'm realizing that I'm up for ve'efer, right? Realizing that I'm not following my desires. And after doing the checklist and checking oneself out, and you believe that this is what God wants you to do, you have to stay strong. You have to, even if everybody's on the other side, you have to be able to stay strong. That's a true leader. That's a true leader. And that's the makeup of Avram. You have to first double check it with these three things. And then on the contrary, if you have these three things, it'll give you the strength to be able to stand up against everybody else. Hopefully you won't have to. Hopefully you'll have a community that follows the ways of Hashem also. Hopefully you have friends and family that could support you. If you don't have family, you have friends. If you don't have friends, you have a community, you have a rabbi. Move to a place. As it says in Ethics of Our Father, right? One should move to a shachan tov. One should have a good neighbor. Good neighbor doesn't mean to say they take your garbage in, which is nice, right? But a good neighbor means to say that they're there to help you spiritually. They're not going to mock you when you keep Shabbos, right? They're not going to mock you, right? If they see other certain things that seem strange and funny. A neighbor doesn't necessarily mean to say the person sitting next to you. But even if you don't have all that, which hopefully you do, we have to stay strong. A true leader, a person that could take on the responsibility of other people to make sure that they're following the right way. A true leader, a person that has that, has to be able to stay strong. Has to be able to be an Ivri, be able to stand on the other side of the river. And yes, we've said this before also, but why does it tell you a river? Because a river is something that's constantly flowing. It's telling us that the society that we live in is constantly in flux. One year it tells us this is normal, another year it tells us that's normal, and 50 years ago that was not moral, now it is moral, and 50 years ago that wasn't moral, now it is. It constantly changes. We have to hold strong. We can't let the current of the river of society wash us away. We have to be on the other side of the river. We have to get through the river to the other side and hold strong for what the Torah tells us. That's a leader. That's true leadership. And that's something that we all have within ourselves to be able to do. We all have it to be able to stand strong, stand firm, be like Avram Avinu, and say, this is what I believe. Don't let, if it's your kids, if it's your parents, if it's your friends, if it's your colleagues, right? If it's other people, don't let them deter you the other way. And on the contrary, you be strong, excuse me, and being able to be strong, to be able to say, hey, if you're able to, don't make sin. If you have the responsibility, parent, a friend, and you have the responsibility, hey, maybe this is really not the right way of doing things. Maybe, we have to reflect and think internally and say, am I doing this because I have a desire? Am I doing this because I think I'm better than other people? I know better than the rabbi. I know better than other people. Am I doing this because I think that because I really want other people's stuff and I'm jealous that they're doing it or this or that? Why am I truly doing it? So we have to reflect internally also. So just to conclude, we all have to be Ivris, as we said. Right? We all have to be strong. We have to be that Avraham Ivri. We all have the Ivri inside of us. But we have to be that Ivri with these three things. And we have to constantly check ourselves in these three things. And when we check ourselves in these three things are actually going to allow us to be strong. And let's not forget, leadership is a responsibility. I'm going to end the recording right now.